The Phantom Rickshaw by Rudyard Kipling. May no ill dreams disturb my rest, nor powers of darkness me molest. Evening Hymn. One of the few advantages that India has over England is a great knowability. After 5 years' service, a man is directly or indirectly acquainted with the 200 or 300 civilians in his province, all the messes of 10 or 12 regiments and batteries, and some 1,500 other people of the non-official caste. In 10 years, his knowledge should be doubled, and at the end of 20, he knows or knows something about every Englishman in the empire, and may travel anywhere and everywhere without paying hotel bills. Globetrotters who expect entertainment as a right have, even within my memory, blunted this open-heartedness, but nonetheless today, if you belong to the inner circle and are neither a bear nor a black sheep, all houses are open to you, and our small world is very, very kind and helpful. Rickett of Carmarthen stayed with Polder of Kumaon some 15 years ago. He meant to stay 2 nights, but was knocked down by rheumatic fever and for 6 weeks disorganised Polder's establishment, stopped Polder's work, and nearly died in Polder's bedroom. Polder behaves as though he had been placed under eternal obligation by Rickett, and yearly sends the little Ricketts a box of presents and toys. It is the same everywhere. The men who do not take the trouble to conceal from you their opinion that you are an incompetent ass, and the women who blacken your character and misunderstand your wife's amusements, will work themselves to the bone in your behalf if you fall sick or into serious trouble. Heatherly, the doctor, kept, in addition to his regular practice, a hospital on his private account, an arrangement of loose boxes for incurables, his friend called it, but it was really a sort of fitting-up shed for craft that had been damaged by stress of weather. The weather in India is often sultry, and since the tale of bricks is always a fixed quantity and the only liberty allowed is permission to work overtime and get no thanks, men occasionally break down and become as mixed as the metaphors in this sentence. Heatherly is the dearest doctor that ever was, and his invariable prescription to all his patients is, lie low, go slow, and keep cool. He says that more men are killed by overwork than the importance of this world justifies. He maintains that overwork slew Panze, who died under his hands about 3 years ago. He has, of course, the right to speak authoritatively, and he laughs at my theory that there was a crack in Panze's head and a little bit of the dark world came through and pressed him to death. Panze went off the handle, says Heatherly, after the stimulus of long leave at home. He may or may not have behaved like a blackguard to Mrs. Keith Wessington. My notion is that the work of the Katabundi settlement ran him off his legs, and that he took to brooding and making much of an ordinary P&O flirtation. He certainly was engaged to Miss Mannering, and she certainly broke off the engagement. Then he took a feverish chill, and all that nonsense about ghosts developed. Overwork started his illness, kept it alight, and killed him, poor devil. Write him off to the system. 1 man to take the work of 2.5 men. I do not believe this. I used to sit up with Panze sometimes, when Heatherly was called out to patients and I happened to be within claim. The man would make me most unhappy by describing in a low, even voice the procession that was always passing at the bottom of his bed. He had a sick man's command of language. When he recovered, I suggested that he should write out the whole affair from beginning to end, knowing that ink might assist him to ease his mind. When little boys have learned a new bad word, they are never happy till they have chalked it up on a door, and this also is literature. He was in a high fever while he was writing, and the Blood and Thunder magazine diction he adopted did not calm him. 2 months afterward, he was reported fit for duty, but in spite of the fact that he was urgently needed to help an undermanned commission stagger through a deficit, he preferred to die, vowing at the last that he was hag-ridden. I got his manuscript before he died, and this is his version of the affair, dated 1885. My doctor tells me that I need rest and change of air. It is not improbable that I shall get both ere long. Rest that neither the red-coated messenger nor the midday gun can break, and change of air far beyond that which any homeward-bound steamer can give me. In the meantime, I am resolved to stay where I am, and in flat defiance of my doctor's orders, to take all the world into my confidence. You shall learn for yourselves the precise nature of my malady, and shall too judge for yourselves whether any man born of woman on this weary earth was ever so tormented as I. Speaking now as a condemned criminal might speak ere the drop bolts are drawn, my story, wild and hideously improbable as it may appear, demands at least attention. That it will ever receive credence, I utterly disbelieve. 2 months ago I should have scouted as mad or drunk the man who had dared tell me the like. 2 months ago I was the happiest man in India. Today, from Peshawar to the sea, there is no one more wretched. My doctor and I are the only two who know this. His explanation is that my brain, digestion, and eyesight are all slightly affected, giving rise to my frequent and persistent delusions. Delusions indeed. I call him a fool. But he attends me still with the same unwearied smile, the same bland professional manner, the same neatly trimmed red whiskers, till I begin to suspect that I am an ungrateful, evil-tempered invalid. But you shall judge for yourselves. 3 years ago, it was my fortune, my great misfortune, to sail from Gravesend to Bombay on return from long leave with one Agnes Keith Wessington, wife of an officer on the Bombay side. It does not in the least concern you to know what manner of woman she was. Be content with the knowledge that ere the voyage had ended, both she and I were desperately and unreasoningly in love with one another. Heaven knows that I can make the admission now without one particle of vanity. In matters of this sort, there is always one who gives and one who accepts. From the first day of our ill-omened attachment, I was conscious that Agnes's passion was stronger and more dominant, and, if I may use the expression, a purer sentiment than mine. Whether she recognized the fact then, I do not know. Afterward, it was bitterly plain to both of us. Arrived in Bombay in the spring of the year, we went our respective ways, to meet no more for the next 3 or 4 months, when my leave and her love took us both to Simla. There we spent the season together, and there my fire of straw burned itself out to a pitiful end with the closing year. I attempt no excuse. I make no apology. Mrs. Wessington had given up much for my sake, and was prepared to give up all. From my own lips, in August 1882, she learned that I was sick of her presence, tired of her company, and weary of the sound of her voice. 99 women out of 100 would have wearied of me as I wearied of them. 75 of that number would have promptly avenged themselves by active and obtrusive flirtation with other men. Mrs. Wessington was the 100th. On her, neither my openly expressed aversion nor the cutting brutalities with which I garnished our interviews had the least effect. "Jack, darling," was her one eternal cuckoo cry, "I'm sure it's all a mistake, a hideous mistake, and we'll be good friends again some day. Oh, please forgive me, Jack dear." I was the offender, and I knew it. That knowledge transformed my pity into passive endurance, and eventually into blind hate, the same instinct, I suppose, which prompts a man to savagely stamp on the spider he has but half killed. And with this hate in my bosom, the season of 1882 came to an end. Next year we met again at Simla, she with her monotonous face and timid attempts at reconciliation, and I with loathing of her in every fibre of my frame. Several times I could not avoid meeting her alone, and on each occasion her words were identically the same, still the unreasoning wail that it was all a mistake, and still the hope of eventually making friends. I might have seen, had I cared to look, that that hope only was keeping her alive. She grew more wan and thin month by month. You will agree with me, at least, that such conduct would have driven anyone to despair. It was uncalled for, childish, unwomanly. I maintain that she was much to blame. And again, sometimes, in the black, fever-stricken night watches, I have begun to think that I might have been a little kinder to her. But that really is a delusion. I could not have continued pretending to love her when I didn't, could I? It would have been unfair to us both. Last year we met again, on the same terms as before. The same weary appeal and the same curt answers from my lips. At least I would make her see how wholly wrong and hopeless were her attempts at resuming the old relationship. As the season wore on, we fell apart. That is to say, she found it difficult to meet me, for I had other and more absorbing interests to attend to. When I think it over quietly in my sick room, the season of 1884 seems a confused nightmare, wherein light and shade were fantastically intermingled. My courtship of little Kitty Mannering, my hopes, doubts and fears, our long rides together, my trembling avowal of attachment, her reply, and now and again a vision of a white face flitting by in the rickshaw with the black and white liveries I once watched for so earnestly, the wave of Mrs. Wessington's gloved hand, and when she met me alone, which was but seldom, the irksome monotony of her appeal. I loved Kitty Mannering, honestly, heartily loved her, and with my love for her grew my hatred for Agnes.